Good morning.
How's everybody today?
Good.
Good. You know what? We have a very exciting speaker. We have a very, very exciting topic. It's all about living trust. So many people do not have a living trust, and they end up in probate. They end up spending more money. They end up hurting their families, and they end up hurting their loved ones because the property and money that they should have gotten, they may not get because it goes to probate. So today, I'm really excited to bring on an expert. He's one of our own. He's one of our top producing agents, and William Borders is going to come on. He's going to tell us all about probate. So why don't you guys put your hands together for Mr. Borders?
Hey everybody, how you doing? I was here before and we talked about trust, and we're going to do it again. And those of you that were with me the last time, I'm going to ask questions. We're going to do it a little different this time. I'm going to ask the questions this time. And then towards the end, we can have a little debate. So the first question is, what is probate?
You have a will, you go to court, and that's how everything is issued out or whatever.
Okay, so I like that answer. Anybody
Probate
else?
is when you don't have a living trust.
Okay.
The process of correcting title because someone's not there anymore.
Pretty close, really. I like his answer really well. Probate is a process, it's a legal process to determine who's going to be the ownership of the property that's in debate. Okay, property has to belong to somebody. Us as realtors, that's one of the first things we learned. And depending on how you hold that property determines whether you're going to end up in probate court or not when that property is no longer when the owner of that property is no longer available to maintain the ownership. So there's a couple of ways to own property to avoid probate, and which are they?
Living trust is one.
That's one. That's the other.
I guess to have your name on the title.
You can have your name on the title, and we're going to talk about that too. I'm going to give you a story, which you're going to really, it's going to make a lot of sense.
You can have a will.
That'll put you in probate.
A will, what?
Yes. I'll explain to you why.
Okay.
Joint title, joint tenancy with right of survivorship. A revocable trust. Those are the two documents, and it's a two-way of holding title that'll avoid probate. Okay. There's another document which is called a deed upon death, which you can transfer a beneficiary, whoever the beneficiary is going to be at the time. You can name that beneficiary now. Upon your death, then the property will go to him. So that's a third way of avoiding probate. It's only three ways. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship, a revocable trust, and deed upon death. Revocable trust. We're going to talk about the revocable trust because it's the strongest way to avoid probate. But what is a revocable trust?
A trust you can change while the person is living.
That's the revocable part of it. The revocable trust is an instrument utilized to avoid probate. While you're alive, you can make changes to the trust. Okay, that's why it's called a revocable. There is a trust called an irrevocable trust. An irrevocable trust is utilized a lot of times for people that have a lot of money and they're trying to avoid taxes by giving up ownership of the property that's generating estate taxes. That's called an irrevocable trust. But what we're interested in is a revocable trust because the revocable trust is the document that we're going to utilize to avoid probate. Now, what's included in the revocable trust? Okay, what's included in the revocable trust?
The
This
deed?
is very important. The deed is definitely, the deed is in there. Okay, but what happens to the deed? What happens to that deed? I'll give you an example. We have joint tenancy with right of survivorship. What's your name?
Mrs. McNeil.
Mrs. McNeil? Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. and Mrs. McNeil own their property, joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Mr. McNeil passes away. Do we go to probate court?
Nope.
Why?
She's still
Joint tenancy.
Right, it automatically goes to her, voice probate. Okay, she passes away. We go to probate?
Yes.
Why?
You don't have a trust.
No, that's not why we're going, that'll prevent you from going. The reason we're going to probate because, again, property has to belong to somebody. It belonged to her, it belonged to both of you guys while you were alive. When you passed away, it went to her. Property has to belong to somebody, so when she passed away,
Has to go to somebody,
who makes that determination?
the government.
The court. How do you get in the court? You
Attorney.
can't just walk in the court. What'd you say, Michael?
Attorney.
How much that cost?
Lots.
That's why the trust is so important. Okay. Probate fees are expensive. They're timely and they're public. All your businesses in the street, you gotta put stuff in the newspaper to let everybody know that you're going to probate court. Or with a revocable trust, you don't have to do that. Okay? It avoids all of that. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay. What's the difference between a will and a trust?
A will is just the instructions.
Ah, very good. Instructions for who?
For those surviving.
Survivors,
Nope,
heirs.
nope. For the court, say it loud.
For the court?
The will is the instructions for the court. Why is that? I have a will, right? Okay. I bequest my property to my nephew, my niece, and my cousins, my uncles. And then all of a sudden, there's a big dispute. Okay, now we're in court. What's the judge gonna say?
What's up?
What's he gonna say? First thing he's gonna look for, as any court would do, when you have a criminal case or any other case, where's the evidence? They look at the evidence, right? So the evidence in a court where there's a probate is the will. Because he's gonna look at that will and he's basically gonna make his decision based on what the will says. Again, how do you get into court with a will? How much that costs? Will is very important. Okay, sometimes when I develop the trust, I absolutely want a will because sometimes, if there is a dispute, that's a backup. Okay. Usually you don't have a problem with a trust as far as court is concerned. You normally never get into court with a trust because you already determined how you want your property to be managed. Okay. But a will is important to have. I gave you guys a document with Stephen Jobs on there. And Stephen Jobs, you guys know who he is? You guys heard of Apple? Okay. He's the one that developed Apple computers. Okay. When he was diagnosed with brain cancer, you can see what he did. He started putting his affairs together. And if you look at what he did, he took his properties and put them in a trust. It was a very smart thing to do because now nobody really knows how much he's really worth. Okay, they have an idea, but they really don't know because all of his assets that he had, him and his attorney, they got together and they did and put all that stuff in the trust. Okay, now while he was alive, who was responsible for the trust? And this is a term you guys need to understand. Who's responsible for the trust while he's alive?
Him,
And he's called what?
trustor?
Trustee. Trustee, okay? Now, when he passed away, he named somebody to be responsible for the stuff that he put in that trust. Who was that person called?
Trustee.
Close. Successor trustee. Okay, when you have a trust, you have a trustee. Now, while I'm alive, I'm responsible for the stuff that's in my box. That's why the court likes a trust because you've already decided how you're going to manage it. Okay, and then you name someone else upon my absence, upon your absence, to manage that trust. And they have to do it per the letter of that trust. Okay, they have to do it per the letter. So you have a successor trustee, so the successor trustee basically says that whatever you have responsibility for, now I'm responsible for. Okay, that makes sense? Okay, I'm gonna give you guys a couple of stories right now, so you can see the benefits of the trust and how you hold title. Last week I got a phone call. William, can you come to the hospital? I got a client, this is a notary friend of mine. I have a client and her mother's in the hospital, and I've been talking to them about the last 4 weeks, about 3 weeks or 2 months, whatever she said, to get a trust. And so now they want to go get a trust. I said, you know what, me and hospitals and trusts, they usually don't work out too good, you know, because, and I'll explain to you guys why. I had one situation where it was good, but the other was, it wasn't too good. Go to the hospital. She comes out, she says, I'm glad you came, and I said, Olivia couldn't come, but here I am. So she says, well, what my mother wants done, she said, we only have this house, but she wants all the kids to be on title on the house. So I said, well, you know, I looked at the title, I said, well, you don't have to worry about probate because the mother had already put her and the son on title as joint tenants with right of survivorship. The mother's passing away in a couple of days. So now the son has responsibility of the property, okay? So I told her, you don't have to worry about probate because she's already put you guys on as joint tenants with right of survivorship. So the son comes up to me and said, well, I want to make sure that her wishes is done correctly. So I said, well, what's her wishes? And she said she wanted everybody to have ownership of this property. Now, mind you, 6 of them. 6 people. So my mind's telling me is that, okay, the only way this is going to happen if she, you know, I'm trying to explain to him that he needs to do a trust, so he says, well, no, she wants to be, I said, the only way this is going to happen is do a tenant in common. So everybody has a 6th interest in the property, okay? Now, I already realized that's a nightmare waiting to happen, okay? And the reason is because everybody has an interest in the property 6 different ways. Let somebody have a dispute or argument, now we got to figure out how we're going to split the property 6 ways, or if I pass away, then my interest goes to my kids, and they can turn around and sell that interest to whomever they want to that wants to buy it. So he hasn't recorded the document, which is the deed, which has tenant in common, and I'm trying to convince him to do a trust. Even though I know his mother's wishes was to put the property in 6 interests, he can still do that through a trust and have control over it. So that was one instance, and the trust never happened. And the reason it never happened is because when I got there, they was feeding her morphine. There's no way a notary is going to go in there and sign a document. There's no way I was going to write up a document knowing that this lady was under that kind of medication. Okay, so that didn't work out too good. The instance where it did work out very well is the woman was getting ready to go into the hospital, and she called me, and we did the trust. She passed away almost 4 weeks later, and the daughter was able to reap the benefit of being a beneficiary of the property. Now, what happened in that transaction is that the realtor called me. I called the realtor because the mother that I had a relationship with called me and said that her daughter was passing away, and she said, can you talk to the realtor? I talked to the realtor. I says, look, I says, what do you have in case this lady passed away? Well, my broker said we have a power of attorney. Okay. And you guys tell me, what is a power of attorney?
It's no good after that.
It certainly isn't. But what is it good for? While you're alive, you can step in the person of that person and do exactly what that person was able to do. When that person passes away, it passes away. Okay. So a power of attorney is really not beneficial upon death. It is beneficial if a person is incapacitated. You know, they don't have the ability to manage their affairs. That power of attorney works very well. Okay. So she told me we have a power of attorney. I said, look, it's not going to work. I said, if she passed away tomorrow, you have a listing and she can't sign any paperwork. So how are you going to sell the property? It's going to end up in probate. And so she said, well, my broker said, I said, well, your broker is any good, he's going to let you know that you're going to need a trust. And so I was able to do a trust for the lady, just a basic trust to keep her out of probate. And she was coherent. She hadn't gone to the hospital yet, but she knew that she was passing away. She did the trust, and the lady, as a result of that, her daughter was able to receive $250,000. $150,000 went to her, and another $150,000 went to her 10-year-old son, her 10-year-old grandson, actually. But that was a good example of how the trust worked. Okay.
So William, I have a question.
Yes.
Just for an example, if she didn't have a trust, how much money would they have gotten if they had to go through the probate?
I'll give you a good example of that one. I had a client that I tried to get them to do it. They called me again on the same situation. The lady's in the back room. She's on morphine. I thought she was, coherent, and she wasn't. And I says, I can't do the trust. So I ended up representing the client and the seller of the property. Had to go through a probate attorney. I think the property sold for like $250,000. I mean, there's $250,000 left from the proceeds of the property. And I think it's almost like she lost like $25,000 after all is said and done, as a result of probate fees, recording fees, and things like that. But she lost almost $25,000. Now, this particular person that I represented, the mother passed away like 4 years ago, and the daughter, she just recently passed away 2 months ago. She had a son that had special needs. And again, you have, even with the trust, you have a trust for special needs children, or anybody that has special needs, you can set up a special needs trust. That would have been beneficial for them at the time as well. But again, I couldn't set it up for them because the mother was incapacitated and on the drug. So she lost almost $25,000 to the attorneys, court fees, and that because she could have had.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
I'm sorry, I was late.
That's okay.
The irrevocable, I have that, thank you. The irrevocable trust and the living trust, is there any difference?
Yes.
Okay.
A revocable trust basically says that while I'm alive, I can make changes and amendments.
The revocable trust.
Revocable, that's why it's revocable.
So you want to keep control of your trust, though, right?
Exactly. And one of the ways you can look at it is say, for instance, I'll give you a good example. When we get ready to refinance houses that have revocable trusts on them, what normally happens is the lender, they don't want to do business with an entity. It's like a corporation or a trust. They'll make you take it out of the trust, put it back in your name, do the loan against you, and then you put it back into the trust. So the only way you could do that is if it was revocable, because you're actually revoking, you're not revoking the trust, you're just basically taking the deed out of the trust. But to give you another example is that if you wanted to make changes to your trust, you could revoke, if you wanted to revoke the trust, then you start all over again, you could do that. Okay, an irrevocable trust is basically an instrument that's used for financial planning. If I wanted to avoid taxes, okay, or if I wanted to, try to take advantage of the tax laws. I'm not a tax person, but if I want to take advantage of tax laws and I have a huge estate, a lot of the people that have property and money, they'll take their properties and put it in their irrevocable trust. And that means they basically eliminate their ownership of that property.
Eliminate the own what?
They no longer own the property itself. They can still benefit from it, but they don't have ownership of it. And that's when you start talking about irrevocable trust, you start talking about, that's a tax planning strategy. And I'm not a tax person.
Okay, so but a revocable trust, you're still the owner of the
Yes.
trust.
Yes.
And you just deed the property into the trust.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes. This is how it works. You create the trust. Okay, it's a revocable trust. Okay, and basically what you do is say, I'm the trustee of this trust. I'm gonna take all this stuff that I have, these properties that I have, and put them in this box. I'm gonna be responsible for this box. But part of the thing, and this is where Michael Jackson got into trouble, and he didn't do like Steve Jobs did, but Michael Jackson in his estate, he put all the stuff in the box, but he never recorded a couple of those properties. That's called funding the trust. Okay, what you're talking about is you take and you say, I no longer am going to hold this property as joint tenants with right to survivorship. I'm going to take it, I'm going to deed it to the trust. And I'm the trustee of the trust. So William Borders hereby quit claims or grant deeds to the William Borders Living Trust. That's what it says on the deed. Okay, you record that, now you funded it. William Borders no longer owns the trust. Now I'm going to tell you this. One way if you want to hide your assets, and you really want to just say, I'm just giving you a little scenario here. Okay, William Borders owns, let's say, the new stadium that they're building in Inglewood.
That's right. Think big.
That's big nuts, right? So, am I gonna name that to the William Borders Revocable Trust? It's gonna be the Flintstone Trust. The Flintstone Revocable, I can name it anything I want. So if somebody wants to go through title and say, let me see what William Borders owns, they'll never see it. They'll never see William Borders own the state. They'll see the Flintstone Trust on it. And how can you find out anything about the Flintstone Trust? You can't. I just gave you something about Jobs, right? You're not gonna find anything on Steve Jobs, on what he owns. That's what they're saying in there. If you read that article, they can't find anything on what he owns. They have an idea because of what he had before he put everything in the trust. They don't know what's in that trust because it's private. And that's the beauty of having a trust.
Who do you make an irrevocable or revocable trust through? Is it a bank, insurance company, or what?
No. The only thing that goes into a revocable trust, not an irrevocable, we're just talking about revocable because the irrevocable deals with tax planning and I'm not a tax person.
Okay.
The only thing that goes into a revocable trust are items that you have title to. You don't put insurance policies in them. You can add to it. You can add it to it, but it's not funded because you've already did what with the insurance policy?
Beneficiaries.
What is it?
Those already have beneficiaries.
Exactly. Beneficiaries already been identified. Okay. Brokerage accounts. Schwab. JP Morgan. Do those go into a trust?
Okay.
Yes. Because there's no beneficiary. Okay. All right. Bank accounts? Yes. No beneficiary. Okay. And matter of fact, a lot of, and I was going to ask escrow when she was here, but a lot of times escrow will want to have a trust account set up for the trust because they don't want to issue the proceeds from a sale of property that was in the trust to an individual. They want to issue it to the trust. So it goes to the trust account and whoever the trustee is, they do the distributions of the trust. Some of them do, some of them don't, but it's just an idea. Any other questions?
So amending the trust, if you wanted to amend your trust, do you have to go back to the person that originated the trust for you? Or
I'm doing an amendment now that was done. I got handed an amendment request last week, and it's a buddy of mine that has an insurance company. One of his clients wants to amend the trust. What you have to do when you amend the trust, the item that's being amended has to be identical, and you have to know exactly what the wording is that's being amended. Okay, you don't have to destroy the trust; it just becomes an amendment. And Amendment 1, Amendment 2, Amendment 2. Amendment could be saying that, you know, I no longer want to have you as the trustee. Okay, whoever the person, the trustee that don't want to have you as a successor trustee.
Right.
Okay, so I want to rename the new successor trustee, then I'll have to make an amendment.
Okay.
Okay, once the trust is recorded and funded, then any changes that are done to it, or amendments done to it, it has to be notarized.
Okay.
Because again, if it's contested, and the trust can be contested, if it's contested, the judge's first thing he's going to say, where's the trust? Where's the amendment? He's not going to listen to what you say, or he says, she say. He's going to want to see the document. And one of the things that's holding me up right now from doing the amendment for this gentleman is that he had not given me the whole, he's giving pieces of the trust. I need to see the whole trust. Because I don't know what sections to amend. Okay?
How can you mess up a trust? I've heard people say, oh, they did my trust wrong, and oh, it was done all wrong. Is that because it wasn't deeded and the deed didn't go into the trust? Or what are some of the scenarios that?
Not recording the deed.
Not recording, okay.
Yeah, you can have a trust. I'm telling you, Michael Jackson, his estate suffered as a result of him, or the attorney not going down and recording the deed. They had everything there, they just didn't record it. Don't record the deed, then you gotta go to probate. Okay. What else can I tell you guys?
William, quick question.
Yes.
So you're saying it's not a good idea to have your name on the
No,
trust?
I didn't say that. I was just using it as an example as if you wanted
You
to
wanna
hide
So if you wanna
assets or
hide, it's
something
not a
like
good
that.
idea to have your name.
Well, yeah, I just, instead of calling it the William Borders Trust, I may call it the WHB Investment Inc. Trust. So when somebody goes to look at me, I say, let me go see what William Borders have, they can see that this property was recorded into the WHB Investment Inc. Trust. And what is that? But the trustee of that trust is me. Okay? I'm still the owner, and I'm still the trustee of the trust. So it doesn't, give any indication that I have assets, because they don't see that. And that's why I wanted you guys to really read that article on Steve Jobs, because that's kind of what he did.
Yeah, that example, so do people need to create a DBA in order not to have their, his or her name on the trust?
No, a DBA or a corporation, to me, that's more of a situation where you're trying to take advantage of tax codes and things like that. Okay, but as far as the trust concern, is that, and I only gave you that example just to show you that that's something that could happen, because say for instance you have a bunch of properties and you just don't want people to realize that you own these properties, you can name the trust anything.
But that name that you use
It's not a DBA,
is not a
because you're not doing business. It's
Okay.
not doing business, it's an estate planning tool. It has nothing to do with how you're conducting your business. It has everything to do with how you're managing your assets.
So it could
Okay,
be
to
whatever
avoid
name.
probate. Basically, the trust that I'm talking about is an instrument to avoid probate.
Okay, so I, kind of what he did say, because he said corporation, so an LLC, the LLC would give you a layer of protection, but it doesn't have to be in a revocable trust, or does it work only in a irrevocable?
See,
Or
again.
do you have to put each property in LLCs?
No. LLC is how you operate as an individual, how you handle your business. I have an S corporation. Some people choose to do an LLC. Some people do C corporations. Okay, but my property is in a revocable trust. And the only reason it's there is to avoid probate. It has nothing to do with how I'm operating my business. Okay, it has everything to do with me being protected from probate court. That's the only reason that I use a revocable trust.
Okay, so, well, this is kind of going off into something else. So the LLC is really, it protects you. It protects you, it's another layer of protection, but there are some tax benefits as well
See,
for the trust.
we're talking about taxes now, and I don't want to get
Yeah, I
into that
hear you.
because I'm not a tax person. But again, LLCs, corporations, that's just an entity. Okay, yeah, it provides a certain amount of layer of protection for you as an individual in the LLC, because you're only limited to a certain amount of whatever you put into a corporation. But again, that's a tax situation. What we're talking about now is just plainly revocable trust to avoid probate. Okay?
Excuse me, William, I do have a question.
Yes.
If a husband and wife is still alive when they create the trust, are
Yeah.
both of them trustees, or is one a trustee and the other one's a co-trustee? Or how
They
does that work?
determine that when the trust is written. Normally what happens, a husband and wife, they'll be co-trustees. When one passes away, that other person becomes a sole trustee. Then when that person passes away, then the successor trustee kicks in.
Thank you.
Okay? Did you guys understand that, what he had just asked?
Yes.
Okay, then that's the whole idea, and that's why the courts like trust, because you basically establish the control. They don't have to get involved because you already established the control.
So William,
Yes.
how does it work? Let's say that you have a corporation and you have a bunch of properties that are on your corporation, and you want to create a trust, a living trust, right? So how do you put those properties into that box that you were explaining us?
You have to retitle it.
Okay.
Because if you titled into the, say for instance, you buy a piece of property and the title on the property is WHB Investment Inc. or whatever, okay, that's the title of the property. If you create a revocable trust, then you can, you still avoid probate.
Okay. Thank you.
Because the other thing is too, you know, even if you have a title with the corporation, you still have some exposure because people can still sue the corporation. Okay, and go after the assets of the corporation, right?
Yeah.
So again, we're just trying to avoid, you know, exposure as it relates to probate court.
What if you have a business? Same thing?
Yeah, you have a business, I can sue you, I can sue the business, okay? And then to whatever level of the exposure or your position in the business, you may have exposure to that suit depending on how the suit is set up. That makes sense?
Yes.
Other than real property,
Mhm.
what else would go into it?
A trust, bank account, vehicles, okay, brokerage accounts, I named earlier, furniture. As a matter of fact, there's an item in the trust that's created called a pour-over will. And basically what that pour-over will says, anything that I did not name in this trust, okay, anything that I didn't put in this trust, I want it to be treated as if it was in the trust. So you're not gonna go to the house and say, well, I want this chair in there, and I want this stove in there, and I want this refrigerator in there. You know, you're not gonna go and itemize all that stuff, you know. And you may have some art. Okay, you may not name it in the trust, but if you do the pour-over will, it'll be treated as if it was.
So what was that word?
Pour over. They pour over into the trust.
Okay.
It's called pour-over will. Yes.
Question, if we have a properties outside United States, we can put in a living trust here?
Yes, you can, but you have to go to the location of where that property is, find out what their documentation is required to do the trust. I'm gonna give you a good example. It's in the United States, but it's Louisiana. And y'all know that Louisiana has real estate laws that are different from anywhere in the United States. I have a client, I was with her yesterday, it's called an open succession. So the attorney in Louisiana, she has property in Louisiana, but her trust is here. So I had to make a copy of the trust, send it to Louisiana so that he can prepare the documentation for Louisiana to put that property in Louisiana into her trust. Okay? So you can have your trust here, but whatever documentation that you need to do to recognize your trust here for the property that's in another country or another state, you need to have that, you need to find out what that documentation is from there. And usually you probably need an attorney or somebody to do that. By the way, I'm not an attorney, and I need to make this disclosure. I gained my knowledge from law school when I was in law school. I got a paralegal in real estate, and that's how I got the skills, and I really honed in on trust and contracts, and that's where I learned to prepare trust. On some of the documentation I've given you, I wanted you guys to see on this page, a couple of pages here. Mike, how much time I got?
You good?
Okay. We went through the purpose of the trust, okay? The pages that you're going to be seeing after that page, these basically came out of the it's called a continuing education of the bar. This is what the attorneys use when they develop the trust. And I kind of pulled out some information from there so that you guys can see that the information that we're talking about. You guys can be at your leisure. I kind of highlighted some of the areas that I kind of want you to look at. Introduction as to what a revocable trust is, how it's an estate planning tool. We talk about the power of attorney. I really want to go back to that power of attorney again because a lot of people really, they get confused on having a power of attorney and a trust. But you guys fully understand the benefit of the power of attorney, right? Okay. Do you know that there's a power of attorney for healthcare? Okay, healthcare director. Okay. We talked about the pool will. I'm going to give you guys a scenario. You guys give me the answer. You and I are married. We have 3 kids. And we go on vacation. I get sick. I don't make it back to them. And we have 3 pieces of property. Okay, and all properties are tenancy right of survivorship. What happens to the property? I'm gonna throw another scenario at you guys, and this is something that you need to give some consideration to. There's a thing called community property. I'm not gonna get too much into it, but I'm gonna just give you a scenario so you can think about it. I have a piece of property, and I sell that property. It was I inherited that property from my mother. Okay, and I got married. When I got married, how is that property now? What is that property down?
Well, did you put her on the deed?
Did I put my-
Do you have to have her come on as a joint tenant with you, or
I
have her
didn't-
quit claim deed?
Nope.
Community property?
It's community property?
No, not in.
Because it's inherited.
Okay.
Excuse me.
We paid on that mortgage, right? Together. We paid on the mortgage together. So what is it now?
It's still separate.
But she has interest in it if
It was inherited. It's mine.
We're together, and we paid on that mortgage, and that property that you have was inherited from your mother. You inherited that property from your mother.
So it's in your name?
It's in her name.
Okay.
She's still in your mother's.
It's in her name. Okay.
It's hers.
She's inherited. It's inherited property. Okay. We're married 3 years down the road. We put our money together. We make the mortgage payment on that property. Okay. She sells that property, and we go buy another property. And the money that she used, the money that she got from her was used to go buy this other property. What do we got?
Oh, that's their property together.
Huh?
The new property is theirs together.
It's community property now, we bought it together.
Was the title?
And it was bought while they were married.
Because she bought it with the house. Unless somebody quit claim deeded it to, to the other.
I think she's still the owner.
She's owner of the
Oh, this
proceeds
is-
from the sale.
Right. She's on for the proceeds of the
That's
sale.
correct.
The money that from the sale went where? To purchase the new property. Now what is it?
But it was purchased while they were married, right?
Yeah.
So then it's
Joint.
joint. Community property, it's theirs.
That's if they took property as joint tenancy with right of survivorship.
So it's still hers? Hit me with it, I'm ready.
I think it's still.
Depends on the whole title.
That's
on the
important.
It depends. Okay, this is a scenario. She inherited a piece of property. The property was hers. She got married. The property is separate property.
That's correct.
Okay, it's still separate. Once I start contributing to the payment of that property, I can start making, a joint account was created. We make payments on that property. It becomes community property.
Wow.
I can argue community property. You know why? I contributed to the community. Okay? Unless she writes a letter stating that this would always be separate property. Because now, if I'm aware of that, all I did was give a gift. Okay? All I did was give a gift. Okay? Because she was specifically continuing to state that this inheritance was community property. Now, using the same scenario, we take this property and she takes that property and sells it to help create another property, these units over here. If she doesn't have that letter stating that her proceeds from the sale of that house is still community property, or separate property, it will become community property. I got off of trust, but I just wanted to just throw that at you.
You're talking about in California.
In California, that's all I can do is California.
Okay.
That letter that she types up, that will have to sign by you, right?
No, sign, yeah, it has to be notarized, and it has to be accepted. Just like right now, a lot of times when we sign off the deeds for financial purposes, the husband has to sign off, or pension plans or something like that, the husband has to sign off that he has no interest in it.
Oh.
It's the same. Makes sense. Any questions? That was a community property a little bit, I just didn't want to go too far off into that. Any question regarding trust? You guys kind of clear on the, you kind of want to, your clients or individuals that you know, if they don't have a trust, it's well worth getting them. It's, you know, the $800 to $1,500 that it costs to have a trust created is much better than going into a probate court, $25,000 coming out of proceeds from a sale, because, and the delay, the intrusion is public. Everybody knows your business, you know, it's frustrating, you know, so it's well worth having a revocable trust. And the reason I put Steve Jobs up there, I mean, he's probably a billionaire based on what they expect, you know, his earnings and his net worth to be. If he can do that and use the law to do that, then we should be able to do the same thing. Okay. Question?
I have a living trust, right, named XYZ Living Trust,
Mm-hmm.
and I get in an accident
Mm-hmm.
and someone wants to sue me.
Mm-hmm.
Is those assets in the living trust protected? No?
Because the suit is against you individually. Okay, remember again, the whole reason for the trust, and that's why I keep saying this box. You take all your stuff and you put it in this box to protect it from what? Not from being sued, but from probate court. Okay? The property has to belong to somebody. So you being sued has no protection as it relates to probate court. That make sense?
Yeah.
What if somebody wants to add a homestead to protect the property or part of the
You
property?
can do that, but the homestead only protects up to a certain limit. Though,
I
right?
know.
Yeah,
$7,000.
you can still put it in a trust. Okay, the homestead is protecting you against a liability.
Huh.
The trust is protecting you from what?
Probate.
Oh, yeah,
Probate.
it's completely different.
Probate. That's all it's protecting you from is probate. You have some tax advantages. I'm not a tax person, but there are some tax advantages, and Steve Jobs used it, using a trust. So there are some advantages in using it, but the biggest protection you have with the trust is to avoid probate. The biggest protection.
You have a revocable trust.
Yes, sir.
You decide that you want to change something in it.
Yes, sir.
There's another fee.
Yeah, it could, yeah, because someone's got to do some work to make the
Yes.
changes, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, William, just a couple other thoughts. If you have a business, the business should go into trust as well, correct, or should it not?
Nope. If you have a business to business, I think the best thing to do is to create a corporation.
Okay, but the business should not go into the trust?
You know, because it's not a probatable, it's not a property,
Okay,
it's an entity.
okay,
And that entity, if you're creating a business, then you need to really think about LLC, partnership, C corporation, S corporation.
okay,
Okay, that's when you start looking at developing corporations, because that's gonna give you the protections and stuff that you use with businesses.
okay. But when you pass on, what's the instructions for that business? How should it be, what's the instrument that we use to describe what should happen to that business?
And I got it on the tip of my head, but, because I did a dentist office, we did this, and she set up, I can't think of the entity, Mike, I'll get back with you on it, but.
Okay, no back end.
I'll tell you exactly what it is, I can't think of it right now.
Okay. Number two, you have some pricing for us, or would you like to handle that individually with anyone that wants to?
It'd be individual, because it depends. What all's going in there, what all needs to be done. I would say that the basic trust that I do is like $850. That's a basic trust. And usually it kind of stays around there, because if you get too far out of what I do, then I'm gonna tell you to go see an attorney. Because I'm not gonna advise, I don't give you any advice. I'm gonna say, you're gonna tell me what you want done. And that's what I'm gonna do. Now, if he starts getting into anything elaborate, I'm gonna say, you need to go see an attorney. And I'll have an attorney, a probate attorney for you to look at. Already a state planning attorney. Okay. For those of us that are going to become very, very wealthy and have a lot of money here in the next couple of years, I would strongly suggest you start looking at estate planning. Okay, which is the trust is the beginning, but there's a lot more associated with wealth that you could protect, and you need to have. I will tell you this: in our lives, we need to have a certain amount of people in our circle. You need to have a good attorney, okay. And when I say that, especially for us, if it's a business, you need to have someone that really understands contracts, and if it's in finances, and you need to have a good estate planner. Okay. And with those two people, I think you'll be pretty set. Question?
Yes. Can you give an example of a basic trust?
Okay, basic trust would say, I am the trustee of this trust. This is the successor of this trust. These are my children, the beneficiary. Trust got to have a beneficiary, who's going to benefit from the trust. Also, these are the properties, or this is the asset that I'm going to place in the trust. Aside that, the deeds need to be prepared. Once the deeds are prepared, then the paperwork that records the deeds to the Hall of Records have to be prepared, because there's some other things outside of the trust that need to be prepared in order to record or to fund the trust. So that's kind of basically it. Before, I used to go down and actually do the recordings, but unless you're a party to the transaction, the recorders won't let you do it now. So I have to prepare the paperwork and make sure that that paperwork is set up to where you can go down and take it and have it recorded.
Okay.
Recording fees have increased over these last couple of years. They used to be like $49, it's like $100-some now for recording fees.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
okay. Now it can get, now if you're talking about an elaborate trust, you're talking about brokerage accounts, going to the bank and having the bank put the bank accounts into the trust, vehicles being transferred into the trust. It can get very elaborate.
Once it's in the trust,
Yes.
can you designate, say, a vehicle, for instance? All right, I'd like this car to go to so-and-so.
Yes. Yes. There is a section in the trust that's called distributions upon death. And that's where you determine where your distributions are going to take place. If it's a property and you have a lot of children, say for instance this particular person, I will create the person that has 6 siblings. I will create a table, and the table would say that each person's name, how much they were going to receive, because you can determine it doesn't have to be equal. Okay, it doesn't have to be equal. You can say, well, Johnny's going to get $500,000, the other person's going to get $1,000. You know, you name that person. And the one thing about the trust, and this is, it's not, I'm not going to say it's a joke, but you're controlling your estate after you've passed away. Because the person that's the successor trustee, they have to follow that trust to the letter. If they don't, they can get sued.
That's right.
And so being a trustee, it's a very important thing to do, because not only that, you have responsibility for paying property taxes, way, you have to, everything that person would have had to do when they sold their property, now you have to do it. And they can be paid too. They can be compensated. There's a section in there whether you want to compensate the person for being a successful trustee or not. Any more questions? So what is probate?
Something you want to avoid.
Thanks, Michael. That's all I have. How do we avoid probate? Okay.
So the fee, it's for more than one property in the trust, or it's an additional cost for each property?
No, it's not additional cost for each property. Where you're gonna, the trust itself, putting the property to the trust and developing the deeds, that's not an issue of fees for me developing that. Where it becomes expensive is when you start going down there having to record them, because they're individually recorded. And that's where you experience a little bit the expense there. And I have no control over that.
Right, right.
Yeah. It's just a little bit, you know, if you give me 10 properties, I gotta put them in the trust. And that's, you know, the deeds have to be created. Now, I can tell you an inexpensive way to do that. I'm not gonna cut my throat, but I'm gonna tell you anyway. The inexpensive way to avoid a trust is to do the deed upon death. Now, it was funny, I did one 2 weeks ago. And I did the deed upon trust, the deed upon death, transfer deed, and did it. I gave it to the, take it to the recorder office and get it recorded. Because she already named who the beneficiary is on there, because it tells you on there who's the beneficiary. She takes it to the recorder's office, they didn't even know what it was.
But
Then the lady came, the supervisor came out and said, oh yeah, it's legitimate, and they recorded it. But it's such a new, everybody used to seeing joint tenancy, right of survivorship, trust, and regular deeds, but they never, you know, a lot of people are not aware of the deed upon death.
is there a time frame? It's not.
You have to just make sure that it's recorded and that person identified, whoever the beneficiary is.
All right, Mr. Borders,
Yeah.
great job.
Good job.
That was good. So if you have more questions for William, talk to him, get his business card, set up a consultation. He's excellent at what he does. And we do have some food for you guys, so please have a meal. Thank you so very much for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.